know so much about you on LinkedIn or Google or Facebook, wherever. So it's always a struggle to come up with something new, please, yeah, and exciting to talk about. But as Deepa mentioned, I'm all of those things also, but the idea is to have this as a more informal conversation as to the journey of an entrepreneur. To my mind, entrepreneurship is a state of mind. You either have it or you don't have it. And those of us who have it, irrespective of where they are always bitten by that path. So my journey started, like you guys, in a university in Delhi. I graduated in the year which was plagued by Mandal Commission. I think most of you were not born back then. And Mandal Commission, given that you guys weren't born then, was a year when reservation came into India, and there was a large-scale disruption in the educational process. So school, colleges, everything was shut for the longest period of time. And coming into college, I thought I was wasting significant amount of my time and my parents' money in terms of getting an education, or so-called education, when nothing really was turning out to be as I had anticipated. So I used that time to try and set up a venture. This venture was to manufacture a chemical called CPW, and the factory was set up in a place called Bhiwadi. Now imagine Bhiwadi 26, 27 years ago. It was quite different from the Bhiwadi that we guys see now. So at that point in time, there used to be this one old Delhi-Gurgaon road, which was broken in tatters. And I used to do this commute every day from North Campus to Bhiwadi to try and set up this factory. So it was a very interesting experience. It came about just by chance. I was having a conversation with someone in college during those days when nothing was happening in class. And this person knew someone else who was looking at setting up this factory, had already had one factory manufacturing that product. And as luck would have it, my father was retiring from the services. So I'm a first-time entrepreneur. No one in my family has ever done anything even closely related to running a business. So they've all been in the services. My mother was a teacher, my father was in the army, then in the government services. So for them it was a very alien concept. But as luck would have it, my father had just retired, he had got his pension. So he was kind enough to loan his pension to me to start this venture. I ran this venture for about 2.5 years. But at the end of the 2.5 years, I lost my father his entire pension. The person I was participating with ended up doing certain things which were not, I would say, ethical in nature. So my first learning came at that relatively early age, that you need to be very careful of who you get into bed with, right? And you guys are going through that phase, so you need to be extremely careful of who you get into bed with, both literally and figuratively. But that taught me a lot, That experience of having spent those 3 or 2.5 years trying to set up a business made me realize that I was not ready for what I was trying to do. So it made me assess my own strengths, my own weaknesses, and I decided it was much better to learn at someone else's expense rather than learn on your own. So I ended up joining Arthur Andersen, did a CA along the way. That really honed my skills in terms of just pure business acumen. It was a fantastic organization. I spent the better part of 7 years with Arthur Andersen. And during the course of those 7 years, I also moved out of India, went to the UK. But again, having done that for 7 years, I had this itch of trying to reinvent myself. And I thought, it's enough to be a consultant, and I graduated from being an auditor to a financial consultant. But it was always someone else's business, someone else's venture. You guys were just coming in and passing advice. And I just thought advisory after a point in time was not really for someone like me. I truly believe those who can do, those who can't consult. So I'm firmly of that mindset that you have to roll up your sleeves and get the job done. And that's why I decided that, listen, it was time for me to get out of the consulting world and get into a real job. And to get into a real job meant having to move out of finance. So I decided to go to business school, ended up at INSEAD, which was a 1-year MBA program and still is, in a place called Fontainebleau, which is just outside Paris. And that was by far the best year of my life. My parents at that point in time could not really understand why I was doing that. I was doing very well at Arthur Andersen. I was based in their office in the UK, and what my father would have made in a year, I was making in a month. So he couldn't really understand what was wrong with me, that I wanted to give all of that up, take a student loan and go study again. But I just felt that it was important to constantly keep reinventing myself and not be stagnant at one place. So I went to INSEAD, spent that fantastic year, took all these student loans and everything. But as luck would have it, our first day of recruitment turned out to be 9/11. So here we are, and like true, Desi boys, we've got massive amount of student debt on our head, thinking about jobs and day one placements and all of that. And all we did, along with the topmost recruiters in the world, is watch the planes crash into the building. That's the only thing. So the only metaphor we could strike was our careers were also going like that. That's the only thing that we could think of. Come, please. So it was a very trying time. And during that process, it took literally every ounce of my own reserve, both physical and mental, to really get through that. Because when you're sitting out there with those kind of student loans, you're constantly then re-evaluating your own decision. And you're thinking, did I do the right thing by coming out here? Was I better off being where I was? But part of being an entrepreneur also is that you need to be able to literally walk through a wall. You need to have that resilience, you need to have that self-belief that whatever problem comes up, you'll find a way around that problem. And that was my learning out of that entire experience at INSEAD. That problems will be there, you just need to find a way of solving it. So just get on with it and try and solve the problem. And from there, I spent an inordinate amount of time looking for a job. And finally, I got a job with Ford Motors. Ford was a fantastic company. I joined their business strategy team, spent almost 2 years with them. But one of the things at Ford which always annoyed me was that my employee ID was 1,78,827. I mean, with that kind of an employee ID, I felt my ability to make a difference to the organization was minuscule. And I couldn't wait for the next 10, 15 years to get to a stage where I could really have an impact on the organization. And that's when I decided that it's better to start or better to join an organization where I could have a larger impact. So I ended up joining this relatively new startup called eBookers. So those of you who might recall, back in 2000, we went through a massive bubble on the e-commerce front. And then 2001 was a big bust. The companies that raised capital in that bubble ended up doing fantastically well over a period of time because they were much more capitalized as compared to any of their peers. So I joined this company called eBookers. They'd done a successful IPO, raised that amount of capital, and I joined there as the Chief Strategy Officer. Gradually moved on to being the Chief Operating Officer and ran that business for about 2.5, 3 years. And then in the middle of 2005, that business got acquired by a company called Sendint. Sendint again was a very large, at that time a $40 billion conglomerate out of the US. So they acquired eBookers. They were getting into the online travel field. They used to own a lot of other travel assets. In fact, they got split later on into multiple entities, but Travelport, Accor Hotels, Avis Car Rental, all of this was part of that group. So eBookers became a part of that group. And as luck again would have it, one of the first things that happened post the acquisition is I got fired. There is a bit of history to that, which is that the promoter was Indian. The guy who started eBookers was Indian. There was another two of us who were coincidentally Indians, not related to him. But then the new management that came in, or the person who bought, or the group that bought the business, for whatever reason, thought that we were too tightly coupled with the promoter. And was successful closing, I still remember 31st of May, I get called in and I'm told, that's it, here is your severance, and please pick up your stuff and leave. That was quite an experience. That was really a shock, and there were 3-4 people in my team. We all went down as a tradition in the UK to go for a leaving drink. So the idea is to take everyone out for a drink. But that night turned out to be a longer night than what we guys had planned because we had a lot to celebrate. And in that moment of Dutch courage, we guys decided, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the term Dutch courage. Dutch courage is when you make decisions under the influence of copious amount of alcohol. So in that moment of Dutch courage, we decided that, listen, we'll show these guys, we'll go and start something on our own and we'll do this in India. When we woke up in the morning and the hangover wore off, Luckily, 3 of the guys out of the 5 still thought this was a meaningful venture for us to do. So we spent the next 6 months literally on a treasure hunt. You go meeting one venture capitalist to another, to a third, to a fourth. We faced lots of rejections at that point in time because India back in 2005 was still not the hot market which it's perceived to be right now. Internet penetration at that time in India was extremely low. Disposable income was very low. Airline penetration was low. So on the back of all of those factors, it was quite hard to convince people that India, from an online travel point of view, would be a great market to go to. But we managed to convince some homegrown investors. So we got the Reliance Group, so Reliance ADAG, we got Network 18, which is TV18, and we got one venture capital firm out of the US to buy into this. And from there on, this journey of Yatra started. This journey started with 2 of us. So as I mentioned earlier, there were 5, then 5 became 3, and then out of the 3, only 2 of us landed in India. So we had this thing from the venture capitalists that the money would not be wired to our account till all of us got back to India. So it's only once we got here that the money got wired, and then only the 2 of us got here. So then the terms again ended up being renegotiated by them. So you go through all of these cycles, but at every point, it was the self-belief. It was the self-belief that whatever problems are coming my way, I will find a solution to this. So as an entrepreneur, and not just as an entrepreneur, I think to be successful in anything that you're trying to do, you need to have that self-belief, you need to have that resilience. Because the solution might not always be obvious. You will have to keep working towards finding a solution, but you need to have the confidence that whatever problems come your way, you will be able to find a solution. And one of the ways to do that is to start thinking about building skills. Sorry. Very often I see people, people that I interview now who want to join Yatra or at forums like this, people are very obsessed about joining a sector or doing a particular task. I want to join retail. I want to join e-commerce. My take to people who think on those lines is not to narrowcast yourself, and the same advice is what I would share with you guys. Start thinking about the skills that you're acquiring. Am I acquiring good sales skills? Am I acquiring good negotiation skills? Am I acquiring sound understanding of finance, right? Business and people management? I think that's what you really need to start thinking about. Start thinking about the skills at this point in time and not get too fussed about, narrow casting about one particular task that you want to do. As long as you keep building the skills and the skills are transferable, you will continue to succeed. Sorry. Whichever environment you go into, you'll be able to use those skills and the learnings from different parts of your own career. So don't get too caught up at this point in time, at this young an age, in terms of trying to specialize in doing a particular thing. Be very open-minded to what you learn, but just think of your mind as a sponge. I always use this metaphor of a sponge, that my mind is a sponge. I'm trying to soak as much water into that sponge as I can and retain whatever best I can. That's the only way one can really, truly be open-minded, because, you never know where good thoughts come from, where good ideas come from. Thank you so much. Thank you. Where good thoughts come from. And you don't necessarily have to be the smartest person around, but you need to make sure that you can create a team of people who are the smartest and lead that team. Sorry, I picked up a bad cough over the last couple of days. So the journey of Yatra started from those 2 guys who came down to India, and from there this online travel piece started picking up. We went through a dream run. So for the first 5 years of our business, from 2006 to 2011, we thought nothing could go wrong. We had grown to almost 1,000 plus people. We were doing somewhere close to 2,500, 3,000 crores of sales. So things looked as if, we had hit pay dirt. And then in early 2012, Kingfisher went under. Our business had a massive exposure to Kingfisher. Air continued to be an important part of our business, and with Kingfisher going out, 25% of the market disappeared suddenly. It also coincided with oil going through the roof, And we really had to think about our business and pivot. Pivot today has become a very popular word, but at that point in time, pivot was not really a much abused word as it is today. But we really had to pivot our business because in a matter of days, 25% of our revenue disappeared. We were left with a huge hole. We were left with investors who wanted to pull out, and we had to slowly start building our business back up again from the peak that it was at. We ended up laying off a lot of people. I think we laid off almost 200-300 people at that point in time. And we made the acquisition of a company called Travel Guru, which was in the hotel space. And that's where we started, diversifying our business away from just air into hotels and then holiday packages. And continued to build it out from there. So, as you can see in this kind of an environment, you can never be absolutely sure, right? Because things can change very rapidly. We are today in an environment where technologies can disrupt you literally overnight, where business regulations can change overnight, especially in a country like India. You've got regulators which are out there, they could introduce a new policy. So as you've seen on the new e-com policy that came out, right, there is some debate around the discounting that can or can't be done, the pricing power that companies can or cannot retain. So all these kind of things come up and overnight your business can change significantly from what it was. So as you go through this process, it's very important to make sure that you, again come back to the resilience, are resilient enough. B, you're constantly trying to think about what is the next problem that you can solve. I think our problem when we were in that stage of 2006 to 2011 was we became very complacent with what we were doing. We thought nothing could ever go wrong. But that came as such a rude shock to us. It shook us out of our comfort zone. That from there on, we've always believed that only the paranoid will survive. So you constantly need to believe that someone can come and disrupt your business tomorrow morning. Someone can come and completely ruin your business. So you need to be on top of it. You need to constantly keep innovating. You need to constantly start thinking of new problems that you can solve. And new technologies that you can adopt. So be very open-minded, right, to what's coming out, and always keep an eye out for new hungry startups. Because what ends up happening is as organizations grow, you start suffering from a not invented here kind of syndrome, which is that you believe that only what you guys are doing is the best. What's happening outside is crap. And more often than not, that's a recipe for disaster. Because what 3 or 4 hungry guys can do, an entire team of 50, 100 engineers cannot. So you need to always have that kind of mindset where you're open to looking at opportunities, not just those which are done in-house, but also things which are being done outside your organization. It's a very dynamic world we live in. I never thought that smartphones in India will take off the way they took off. I'll give you one example of how we guys missed that bus initially. We were working very closely with Nokia, and Nokia used to have a platform called the OV platform. And we were the only partner in India on the travel side. We spent years and years with them, and then suddenly Android came and the market just moved entirely from OV to Android. And then you were scrambling like mad to get your business to move in that direction, and you're trying to tell your people that, listen, junk OV, but let's jump onto the Android ship. So the culture that you create in an organization is also very important. I know I'm talking a lot about entrepreneurship and organization, but I think it holds true in every aspect of life, not just in terms of entrepreneurship. So the culture that you create is also equally important. And that is what really makes sure that your organizations are able to innovate. Your organizations are made up of people who are nimble. And are people who are not going to be disruptive in any process. They're the kinds of people who will be part of you in terms of finding a solution, as opposed to constantly trying to look at what they've done, as opposed to externalizing the opportunity. So I think we have abundance of water now. That's how quickly markets can change, right? From scarcity to abundance in a matter of minutes. So this journey that we've gone through, we've now at a stage where we're about 2,500 people. We do about almost 7,000 crores of sale, and we are now on the verge of listing in the US as part of an IPO. So it's been a very interesting journey that we've been through over the course of the last 10 years. But this journey would not have been possible without the people that we have. And my one learning out of business school, I was a CA when I went into business school. So as most Indian kids growing up, I had a natural affinity towards math. Right? So I ended up taking courses which were very hardcore finance-led. So derivatives, options, all of those kind of things. And I would always miss out on classes which were related to organizational behavior. Things that we guys used to call the touchy-feely stuff. And I used to have there was an old professor over there who used to run this class, a very well-respected gentleman. And towards the end of the program, he told me one thing, that over a period of time, you will realize that life is only about OB. It's only about organizational behavior. It's not about finance, it's not about options, derivatives, and he's been so right. Like the last 10 years, I mean, I would not even have touched any of this. My work revolves around managing people. It revolves around understanding consumer behavior. It revolves around understanding new customer trends which are coming about. But at the end of the day, it revolves solely around getting the 2,000 people who are there, the 2,500 people, to make sure all of them work in the same direction, and to make sure that these guys truly feel that they're working for an organization for which they're willing to give their heart and soul. You spend a lot more time today at work than you do outside work. So if you factor in that you're going to spend whatever, an hour coming into Gurgaon if you're lucky, an hour and a half, 2 hours going back, and then spending 8-9 hours in the middle, the only way you can do that is if you truly believe you're working for a higher cause. If the only reason you get out of bed is to think that I have to achieve my sales target today, you will never be able to do that for a long period of time. So my take to my organization is that we guys are so fortunate today that we are born in India at this point in time. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. Our parents never had it. It's unlikely that our children will have it. So this is like what the US had in the baby boomer years, what China had in the 90s. We guys, just by being fortunate enough to be born at the right place at the right time, have won this lottery. So we need to make the most of it. We've got this opportunity to really impact consumer behavior. You look at what 2 or 3 of us have done in the course of the last 10 years now, hardly anyone would book travel offline. I mean, in India today, if I just leave aside corporate travel, almost 70+% of travel is booked online, either online or on mobile devices. No one would ever have bet on that 10 years ago. But thanks to the efforts of 2-3 of us and 1 or 2 airlines who decided that, listen, this is a real change that we can effect in this country, we've been able to achieve that. The same has played out on the e-commerce front. Right? We've seen this over the course of the last 3 to 4 years, that today commerce has moved on to mobile devices. So I think that's the power of what we can do. Right? It's, we are fortunate enough to be a part of this revolution, and we should seize every moment of this. So not be complacent about it, use this as a gift that's been given to us and try and maximize this. And that's the only way we guys get out of bed in the morning. Right? I come out thinking that today I have the opportunity to really make a change. I have the opportunity to influence millions of people. That's what drives me. Right? Otherwise I would never be able to get out of bed like this. And believe me, if you're running, or if you're an entrepreneur, irrespective of what scale you're running your venture at, it is 24/7 in today's environment. We have investors in Singapore who are up before I'm up, and we have investors on the West Coast in the US who, are waking up as we are going to sleep. So it's pretty much around the clock that you guys work, and you're expected to do that. So that's what, drives you. You have to think of a higher cause which is driving you. Otherwise, if you're just thinking that today I have to achieve these marks in this test, or I have to score well in this MBA, and I just need to keep at it and keep mugging, I don't think you'll be able to do it for too long. And also, it's not that, I was born with this epiphany. I was a very poor student in the earlier days of my life. I was obsessed with playing cricket. And it's only when I did not make it to the state team, I played under 15, and then at the under 17, the level changes so drastically that I did not make it. But it came as a rude awakening that, listen, you might be good in your own sheltered environment, but the world outside is brutal. It's hyper-competitive. So either you have to build yourself to be able to compete in that world, or look at a niche where you think you can achieve that. So I think for someone who was very poor in studies, I ended up studying a lot post that. Once that realization happened, it happened pretty late in life, but fortunately enough, it happened. From there on, I did a CA and then went on to do an MBA. So as I said, for someone who was very poor in his early days in terms of studies, ended up doing a lot from an academic point of view. I want to just pause there. Sorry guys, I have a very bad throat. So I'm going to pause there. But I want to use this more as an opportunity for Q&A with you guys. The idea is not for me to just sit up here and stand up here and give yarn, but to make this an interactive session. So please feel free to ask whatever questions you have, and we can, build on that conversation. Sure. So the question was, what were the major challenges that we faced when we were establishing Yatra? So there were 3 or 4 key challenges that we faced. First and foremost was putting a team together. Because any venture that you're looking at starting needs to have a team which is made up of complementary skills. And it's important in the team for each member of the team to realize what is the role that he or she has. And I think that's something over a period of time we've done a very good job of between the 3 of us who got together initially. So that was the first one. Once we had the basic team in place and we came back to India, then the next part was trying to convince the first 30-40 people to join us. Because there you don't really have a business at that point in time, your brand is not live, and you're selling a dream. So you need to have very good sales skills to a certain extent to be able to convince people to leave whatever jobs that they are doing at that point in time to come and join you and be part of this so-called revolution. It was easier for me to convince these 30-40 people than to even convince my own parents. And my father had this mindset कि इतना पढ़ लिख के आप travel agent बनोगे. So trying to pitch online and internet and all of that to him, but he's like net to So this was the second one. The third was convincing investors around the potential of the Indian market. It was not a very obvious potential at that point in time. India had only about 3 to 4 million internet users. India had only about 1.5 to 2 million credit cards at that point in time, and disposable income and GDP per capita was extremely low. So convincing investors that India was the next big bet at that time was the other big challenge that we have. So Make My Trip was live. Make My Trip actually was that time focused on the US-India business. So they had a very large US-India business and then had started an India business in 2005. But that India business was still in its nascency. So you couldn't give them as a surrogate and say, hey listen, there is someone who's already been able to establish any traction on that.
My name is Abhishek, and the question is how does Yatra plan to deal with the competition in this age? I mean, for that matter, Go, Make My Trip, for that matter, Paytm also these days.
Absolutely, and that is something which really keeps us awake 24/7 right now. One of my strong beliefs on this is that a business is not built on the is not built on the back of discounting. Okay. A business has to be built on something which is fundamentally a lot more sustainable than a short-term incentive that you give to the customer. And that's one of the reasons why between the two competitors that you named and us, we've taken a very different approach on the marketing front, right? We're not running these kind of deep discounts because, as I said, my belief is that over a period of time, if you start training a customer to come to you only for a discount, the day your discount stops, he's not going to come to you. Right? That's something I very strongly believe in. So my focus has been in terms of trying to build product and focus on the technology. On the product front, to give you an example, we've got about 62,000 hotels on our platform compared to about 30,000 or 35,000 which Make My Trip has. So we've focused our efforts in terms of building supply which we think can truly meet that price point of a consumer as opposed to trying to discount that out of our own pocket. Just because a product today is priced at X 0.5x, right, I'm able to procure it. But that doesn't mean that my disposable income has gone up to afford it when the price of that product comes back to its normal selling level. So I think that's just artificial demand generation which is happening, and it takes a lot of resolve at this point. Right? I constantly, like you asked me this question, my investors ask me this question, my team asks me this question that, why aren't we discounting? Why aren't we just giving, things away for free? I mean, if he can do that, then the guy on the road can just start handing out a buck and everyone will buy from him, right? So the hard work in this is to try and invest more on product and technology in terms of building out longer term sustainable differences. And that's what we are focused on. So we've built a common platform that services corporate travelers, that services travel agents and retail consumers. So everyone comes onto that same common platform. That's something that we've invested in which is unique to us. Hotels, like I said, we've built out the supply. So we've taken that approach. And I think there are some opportunities again on the public transport front out here to solve, which are very large opportunities. So the endeavor is to try and build something which is going to be much more long-term, much more sustainable. It won't have the same spurts in terms of growth rate every now and then, which discounting can drive. But it also has a model which is inherently a lot more sustainable and is not dependent on cash coming through to constantly keep funding this. So that's been my take on this. Only time will tell whether this is the right approach or not, but I truly believe in this approach.
Thank you.
Yeah, please, yeah.
What was your vision when you started Yatra.com? How does it differ from other travel spaces?
Sure. So when we started Yatra.com, to be absolutely candid, we didn't have a grand vision or anything. We were simply trying to look at this as an opportunity. And I think we were naive because we did not fully anticipate the scope of the opportunity. It's over the period of the last maybe 5 or 6 years as the business scaled up that we started really thinking about what is the problem that we can really solve, why is it that we exist. And now our endeavor is to try and solve urban transportation. How can you provide consumers with a connected transportation solution as opposed to just a travel solution for a flight or a rail or a bus? So that's our endeavor. We want to try and figure out how do we build one interconnected platform for the customer that solves his door-to-door journey as opposed to just solving one part of it.
So, what purpose drives you? What is that purpose that drives you?
Sure. The purpose that really drives me is to create change, right? To create a change in human behavior, to create an impact on the economy, and to create, build a lasting business, something that will outlive me. That's the thing I'm most worried about. That my focus is to make sure that we build a company which will be there even when I'm not there, both in terms of with the organization or even when I'm, let's say 30, 40, 50 years later not around. So that is the key to this, right? That's what really drives me, that can I build a lasting institution as opposed to a company which is there for a short period of time.
My name is Anurag. I have this question that in your initial stages, how did you build the culture where you did not have the other factors like finance or manpower?
See, the second part of your question was the answer itself. in the early days, we didn't have money, we didn't have a brand, so the only thing we had to offer to people was a culture. Right? We could offer them a much more open culture. So guys who were coming in from IBM, HP, TCS, Infosys, we were all bunched together. Our first set of 25, 30 engineers, we were all bunched in one room. And the room was about 1/4 of this size. So we would literally have every conversation as an open conversation. We guys would eat together, go out for a drink together. So it was a very inclusive environment. It was also an environment where we consciously ensured that there was no hierarchy. And for a lot of our people coming in, they were used to very strict hierarchies. So they loved the freedom of not being in a hierarchical environment. They also, over a period of time, began to love the fact that they could take decisions. See, what ends up happening is, in large organizations, people are used to pushing the decision up the value chain. So when they first came in, it was a real culture shock for them that they were being forced to decide. And people would say, why don't you take a call? Right? So everyone wants to pass the buck back to me. That, can you decide? So to build the culture, that's what we focused on, having openness, making sure that people could take decisions and not really, hounding people for taking bad decisions. Right? So you create a culture of openness and trust. It was easy doing it with 40, 50 people. It was easy doing it with even 200, 300 people. It's much more challenging right now. Because earlier what also was happening was, in a smaller organization, you've got maybe 5 or 6 key people that you hire who become the flag bearers of the culture. When the organization expands, then you don't just need 5, 6 people. Now you need 500, 600 people. Right? Each guy can influence maybe 5 to 7 other people, or maybe 10 other people. So even then you're looking at 250 odd people. So finding 250 people like that is a much bigger challenge. So today there are a lot more structures around trying to build culture. One of them again is having a vision. The second is having the value statement and constantly articulating those value statements to people who are coming to the organization. And the third part is in terms of this higher purpose. Right? So one is the company vision, and the other is then also making people believe and buy into the vision, or rather, the higher purpose that we have for being here today. Right? You want people to feel that they are part of a revolution that's happening, and that's what's going to motivate them to work 24/7.
You said that now as the business is being built, so what leadership qualities are you looking for an individual to work on and look at the team which will be following?
Sure. So depending on the role, you decide what is it that you want in people, but beyond the core value set which is there, so it's very important to make sure that your moral compass is aligned to the people that you're hiring. Beyond that value set, what I look for are, one, people need to be bold, meaning they're brave enough to take decisions. They're willing to be disruptive and disrupt. Right? Because it's critical in our kind of business to be able to even disrupt your own ongoing business as opposed to letting someone else disrupt. Right? So people who are disruptors, and then people who again, have this zeal of trying to solve problems. They should not be the kind of person who's going to give up easily. Because in our kind of business, there is no precedence. You don't have a 10-year, 20-year history of someone else having done stuff like this. So every day you're charting your own course. So you want people who've got that problem-solving mindset and who have that belief that they will be able to find a solution. I mean, he might not know the solution. It's not to say that you want someone who's just going to bullshit his way through it, right? That's not the objective either. But someone who truly believes that he will be able to intelligently find a solution. Yes, please. Yeah.
How has Yatra deployed the power of social media analytics, digital marketing, and analytics per se to create a dynamically evolving, strategy that outweighs competition?
Sure. So analytics plays a very important part. Social media um, has started evolving in the last few years. In the initial years, it was less relevant. In the initial years, it was still, the market was pretty much offline. So we went through the process of large-scale brand building in the traditional media to guide people from offline to online. But in today's environment, once we've got to that stage, social media plays a very important role, not so much only in customer acquisition, but in terms of your brand perception. You need to make sure that you're on top. So one of the things that we do, for example, is any alert or people, we've got a marketing team, and within that team we've got people who've got alerts set up for any time the Yatra word is used in any of the medium. So there is a tool that we have, that tool pulls out that, and that allows us then to respond to that. So whether it's a tweet, whether it's someone's posted something on Facebook, or just on the net, right, be it TripAdvisor, we have this mechanism whereby we pull that and then we respond to that. So that's something you have to do 24/7, and that's one of the challenges of social media, right, that things can be viral very quickly.
How do you deal with negative comments and negative sentiments?
Yeah. And in our business is pretty much about exception handling. 99 point some percent of our business will be touchless. But this remaining, whatever, 70, 80 basis point where manual intervention is required is what is the true test of our business. So one of the things that I try and recommend to our team is that you need to be open enough to own up to your mistake. I mean, if you're open in terms of owning up to your mistake, you won half the battle. The problem that happens is that people, even within our organization, will not take ownership for solving the problem or try and brush it under the carpet. But that's where culture comes in. So you have to constantly keep reiterating that as a culture, as an organization, you want to own up to your mistakes. And if you do, people are, I think, fairly forgiving. The problem is if you don't own up to your problem and you try and push it back onto the consumer, that's when the customer starts getting irate. On your point on analytics, we are a very, very analytical company because of, just the educational background some of us initially in the founding team come from. We are very number oriented, very number driven. So we've got numerous metrics which are there, and on the platform there are at any given point in time at least 8 to 10 different experiments which are running. So consumers will see, you might see a different price than someone else, you might see a different button somewhere else than from someone else, and each of these impacts is then minutely measured and monitored to see what is the one which is giving the best result. So that kind of testing prowess is something which has been built over the last few years, and today I think there are tools which are available in the market also that allow you to do that. Sorry, your question.
Sir, as per the research that I did before coming to this session, Yatra.com it acquired buzzandtown.com in the year 2012. So what opportunity did you see in this Indian entertainment portal?
Sure. So Buzz is something that we acquired back in, as you said, early, I think 2012, Jan 2012 is when we acquired them. The endeavor at that point in time was to use this as a cross-sell. So someone who's bought a flight to a particular destination, we push to him what are the things which are happening in that destination. So you're going to Bangalore tomorrow, these are the 3-4 happening things in Bangalore for tomorrow, right? Or these are the events which are happening. Unfortunately, I think we haven't really done as fantastic a job of that business as we would have liked to have done, because post the acquisition of Buzz, we went through the Kingfisher phase, and in that phase we then really had to double down on what really mattered. Right? We had to cut costs. We decided that some things which are on the fringe will not get enough oxygen today. They got starved of oxygen, and the business focused only on the core elements. We are now, 4 years down the road, I think at a stage where Buzz is evolving into an activities platform. Because again, thanks to smartphones, people today are accessible when they're in the destination. See, earlier what used to happen is someone would book a flight, let's say 10 days in advance. at that point in time, he's not really thinking about what he or she is going to do when they reach the destination. You really start thinking about what you're going to do in the destination maybe a day or two before you really travel, or when you're there. Because a lot of this actually is impulse buying. So today, thanks to smartphones and mobile apps, we are able to do this much better. So we're seeing a strong revival beginning to happen on that business, but it went through a real tough phase between 2012 to 2016. I think it was a great concept, but maybe a bit ahead of its time. Today, as I said, we're now seeing smartphone penetration being where it is, mobile app being where it is. We are seeing a lot of traction on activities. So events, activities, dining out, all of these are getting a lot of traction right now. So this business in the last 6 months has started doing very well. Yeah.
So my name is Pratali. Like you mentioned, it's all about managing people and consumer behavior nowadays. So being a consumer myself, while we are like booking flights, hotels, we compare two things to look for the cheapest one. So we actually looking for discounts. So how does quality really come into picture?
That's a very good question. But what ends up happening is we've realized, and we've got tremendous amount of data now to support this, that for the first two transactions, a customer is an intensive shopper. Once you've bought maybe a couple of times, then if it's the same site which has consistently come up, then next time onwards, you start being a loyal customer. Because you start valuing the convenience a lot more than a slight price differential. That price differential also, depending on the product, is limited in India. I think that's something that one has to realize. So on our flights business, that differential is hovering between 60 to 75 rupees. If on the domestic flight product, your price is within that much of a premium, customers who are loyal to you still end up buying. But if your difference starts going beyond that, then customers start moving away. So it's only, through trial and error and through running multiple tests, you start empirically building up data to start supporting these assumptions. But at the end of the day, when price is the same, so for a minute assume that you start and you've got 3 sites, all of them have the price exactly the same. Then it's a function of the brand perception that you have and the visual appeal and the layout of the site that you have. Right? Those are the factors that then make the difference. Right? Because then the price is the same. So how do you choose if price is the same between, let's say, Ola and Uber? How do you choose which one do you buy from or which one do you book? Right? Assume price is the same, the duration in which the cab's going to come is the same. Right? Or Amazon and Flipkart.
Loyalty points.
This is your first transaction. Right? So it's user-friendly, it's your perception of the brand. And user-friendly is a very, very hard to define term. Right? I mean, everyone says they're user-friendly.
It's subjective.
It's very, very subjective. Right? And we used to have this, and between the OTAs, it's no secret, right? You've got one player like ClearTrip who's got an absolutely clean site, and then for the longest period of time, we were a real clutter. And the reason we were doing that was because when we would run dip tests with our consumer segment, our customers were people who are used to shopping in Big Bazaar. They are used to seeing deals screaming at them. So whereas you look at a South Mumbai customer who is typically a ClearTrip customer, that person is a much more evolved consumer. So I think it's very important to understand what is your market and how does your market react to customer friendliness. What do they view as a deal? What is it that they value? That's where understanding consumer behavior comes in.
So, but in case like talking about Make My Trip, they're providing continuous discounts. And like for example, I am booking my tickets through Make My Trip, and I've booked it 5 times, and I've continuously got discount. So the 6th time, I'll tend to go to Make My Trip site only rather than visiting any other.
Right. So 6 is an aberration. Typically, it happens after 2 transactions.
Yeah.
So what we've seen is, 87% of consumers who bought twice will come back and buy from you. Right? And that's how it plays out. So it's important, again, using data, using analytics to figure out when the customer is coming to you, what is the kind of behavior this customer is exhibiting. And then, start looking at the pricing that you're displaying to that customer to be able to entice him to make the first transaction with you, first and then second. So once you do the first transaction, then loyalty points kick in, then the e-cash kicks in, and then you start coming back and buying again.
So sir, isn't discounting a really essential crucial part in the Indian market nowadays in the travel portal.
I agree, right? It's not that I'm not saying it's not, but discounting on the first transaction, discounting on the second transaction, but discounting 6 transactions, like you said, is then, doesn't really have any financial sense. See, at the end of the day, you need to look at a customer's lifetime value, right? And if you run that math on a customer's lifetime value, if every time you're going to have a negative acquisition cost, then that lifetime value never turns positive. So the more you sell, the more you lose. I mean, that's just a very bizarre notion. And I know China has been through that phase. I know a lot of foreign investors press hard for that. But I think my own mindset somehow does not really gel with that. I know it's going to happen, and it's happening to us. We've lost some market share on hotels, for example, in the last 6-8 months, ever since this discounting war happened. But it's a matter of time, I feel. I mean, people will burn through their money, and then what? So it's okay. I mean, we are here, we want to be here for the next 30, 40, 50 years. So 6 months is an aberration. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's been a very interactive session. At times, I didn't realize that we went to the hour.